But I remember he told us that on the way, he'd had a little traffic altercation with some young guy, and he had to punch him. And I'm thinking, Jesus, you're an old man, you know, you're getting in a fist fight? I was really impressed.
Rob Word. Welcome to A Word on Westerns, and today we're going to go back to one of the shows that I loved as a kid. And if you're my age or even close or even saw reruns, you love it too. The show was The Adventures of Spin and Marty, and our star today is Spin, Tim Considine. Come on in, Tim. Welcome. Glad to see you.
I say spun because it was so long ago. You know.
Well, we'll be spinning some spun yarns,
All
I guess,
right.
today then. Now, that series was a phenomenon. It was 1955, I think, on the Mickey Mouse Club. And this was the early days of TV, and nobody really understood, maybe Walt Disney did, the power of television.
It amazed us. Dave Stollery is still a friend of mine. He was Marty. We're still mates. We had met before that, but we had no idea of what the Mickey Mouse Club was. We were just doing a play out at, you know, the Golden Oak Ranch, which Disney now owns, but they didn't own it then, oddly enough. But we didn't know about the Mickey Mouse Club. We didn't know that they cut it into 15-minute segments. It was one story for us. And we had no idea of fame or anything like that. I mean, we were just doing our thing.
So you thought it was just a movie that Disney was producing. It was shot in the summer, I would assume, because there's so many kids.
We did know it. I mean, I think we knew it was for television, but it was presented to us as one story, you know, so we just showed up every day and we continued the story. I know personally, I had done one of my retirements from the business. And
at what age?
Probably 13, 14. I had one experience that wasn't fun. That was it. I said, I don't want to do this anymore. My parents were in the industry. My father was in the industry for many, many years. And he knew about kid actors. He knew what the pressures were, and I was just a kid, and they were not really anxious for me to do this. My agent was actually a family friend, and the kind that you call uncle when you grow up. There are some people that are so close to your family, you call them Uncle Sam. There was this cattle call for kids, and I was bashful at the time. I mean, I was not an actor, and there was this scrum in this room, and I was like, you know, outside of it, and it scared me. But I had like my blankie was a little race car that I had in my hand. And this other kid came around the scrum and said, that's a really neat car, you know. It's a C-type Jaguar, if anybody here is into cars. And we struck up a friendship, Stollery.
Really?
That was when we were, what, 11 or 12 years old.
And were you both cast in that film?
We were both in that film, and so our friendship, you know, continued. Terrific. And then afterwards.
When you were cast as Spin, how did that process happen?
Well, as I said, I had retired.
So you came out of retirement.
It was never a career for me. Mm-hmm. It was just something I did because it was fun, and when it wasn't fun, that was it. I'm out of here. And I had an experience that wasn't great, and I said, I'm not doing this anymore. And my family said, fine. You know, they didn't care. Disney is doing something. Well, the Disney show was on every week, and Disney was like Red Skelton to me. My ears went up. And,
your mouse ears?
No. No. And so I went out for this thing, and they were doing I remember I played baseball most of the day, and Bill Walsh, who produced it, was the catcher. I pitched, and he was the catcher, and there was a bunch of kids, and it was called the Marty Markham story, and it was based on a book And Marty Markham was this snotty little rich kid. And somehow I got it. But I got the part of Marty. And Uncle Sam called me back and said, well, you got it. You got the part of Marty. And I said, I don't want that. I wanted to be his friend.
I'm retired.
No, I said I wanted to be his friend. His friend was more cool, you know. He was a guy who knew about horses and all of that. And he said, well, you can't do that. That was just a tiny little part. And I said, well, I really don't want to do it, you know. And he called the studio back and said, well, my guy wants to do it, but he'll only do it if the two parts are equal. And he wants to play spin. And I didn't say that to him. I just said I didn't want to do it, you know. And
Uncle Sam was smart.
And so I got to play the cool one, right?
Yeah.
And
yeah, nobody wanted to be Marty.
and I actually suggested him. I thought he'd be
How
great
nice.
for it.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I always take credit for his entire career. Actually, I mean, he was a very good and very experienced actor. I was not. I was neither, you know.
But you were the cool kid, so it was okay.
I was the cool kid. That was our first experience with fame or celebrity. We didn't know anything about that.
Well, what was great about the show, for those of us watching it, was instead of on a sound stage with a canned laugh track or something, you all were really out there on a dude ranch with horses and outside.
Yeah, and at the time, they gave us both horses, and I was enough of an actor that when they said, can you ride a horse? Oh, yeah, sure. I was scared to death of horses. They were bigger than me, you know, and so they gave us horses. And out at Pickwick, we rode around and we had lessons on how to ride and so on and so forth. And then we transferred to, I forget the name of the stable, but it was a place that supplied horses to movies. I remember the guy's name, George Gesford. Does that mean anything to anybody here? You know? Well, then I can tell lies like crazy. But what I remember about George Gesford was he was a big guy, but he rode with his shoulders back. And the horse kind of moved under him, but he was rigid like that. And he had a kid. He ended up being my double in Spin and Marty. And they had another guy who was going to be my double, but he rode all hunched over like that. They were brothers, and they were kind of famous brothers. And he was a great rider and a great stuntman, you know. But I didn't want to look like that. You know, I couldn't ride a horse worth of poop, but I didn't want to look like that. I wanted to look like George Gesford. And George Gesford had a kid working for him. And through George and me, he ended up being my double. And so I looked like I could ride a horse like crazy, you know. And I learned, but I mean, I wasn't as good as I looked like, you know.
Shooting those, you probably had to shoot in the summer because you were going to school.
Yeah.
What was the weather like at the Disney Ranch?
Hotter than hell.
Really?
Yeah, hotter than hell. Yeah, it was way out in the valley in Placerita Canyon. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And yeah, it was hot. Mm-hmm. And we'd go out on buses every day, and I hated buses. But when we got there, it was pretty much playtime, you know. And
how long were the days for you kids?
There were very strict limits at the time. Mm-hmm. You had to be so much school, and the school, well, at that time, the school could be 10 minutes, and then you were out shooting, you know. And what do you learn? You know, it takes you that long to figure out where you left off, which explains my ignorance. And later they said, no, there was a minimum time, and I forget what it was, like 30 minutes. You had to be in the room 30 minutes. That was a minimum. But at the time, it was nothing. Mm-hmm. In the summer, we didn't go to school. Right. So, but in the rest of the time when I was working and stuff. It was 10 minutes or whatever.
You had one of the great character actors, actually a couple in that series, Harry Carey Jr.
Oh, yes. Dobie.
Yeah.
The only other time I've been at the Autry Museum was with Dave Stollery and Dobie. And I remember he must have been in his 70s, which I am on the long end of that now. But I remember he told us that on the way he'd had a little traffic altercation with some young guy, and he had to punch him. And I'm thinking, Jesus, you're an old man, you know, you're getting in a fist fight? I was really impressed. And then they showed some film before we came out, and we were all in the back looking, and none of us knew anything about what they were showing. You know, do you remember that? No, I don't remember anything like that, you know, and none of us could remember. That's the only other time I've been at this museum.
Did Walt Disney ever show up on location?
Oh, yeah.
What was he like?
Yeah. Oh, he was wonderful. He was very quiet. He was not, you know, a big-time loud boss with a retinue of people around him. He was quiet. A lot of times when we shot in the studio later and for other series, somebody would say, "Mr. Disney's here." What? Where? You know, he would sort of sneak in at the back. But he was very nice, soft-spoken. He was building Disneyland, you have to remember, at the time that was very interesting to us, because we had watched the Disney show, the hour-long show, and he talked all about that. So when he was building Disneyland, if you ever wanted to talk to Mr. Disney, all you had to say is, "How are things at the park, Mr. Disney?" And he would take you, this is when we were at the studio, he would take you up to his office, and he had like a ping pong table, but much bigger, and that was Disneyland. And he'd show you, "Well, we're building this, and we're going to do this over there," and it was tremendous.
Wow.
Yeah.
And the show, because it was such a phenomenon, there were other seasons.
Oh, yeah,
You know, the
3
further
seasons of that one.
Annette also.
Yeah. And the other one, the Hardy Boys.
Yeah, the Hardy
Yeah.
Boys was big, too.
Another
and Tommy
show.
Kirk.
Right.
Yes.
Right.
Those were good. Made me start to read because of those.
Really?
Yes. My mom said it was comic books, but I said, no, it's the Hardy Boys.
Mine was the Oz books. That's the only thing I read, you know, was the Oz books.
Tim, it's been great having you here, and I want you to know that a lot of us grew up watching those Spinnin' Martys, and they still mean a lot to us, and we want to thank you.
Well, thank you, and thank luck. For me, I always say, thank God there's no justice in this world for my life, you know.
All right, was that okay? Sure. My name is Rob Word, and we love bringing these programs to you. We've got a lot more scheduled coming up. We post a new one every single week, and we want you to subscribe, like, and share. Thanks for watching.